Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Raw Reaction series, the show in which I and sometimes other people react to the latest Arsenal news, transfers, matches, whatever. We react to it on this show and give my honest opinion, no sitting on the fence, giving my honest opinion about what I think about the latest Arsenal stuff. And today I'm basically going to do a reaction to what was the Arsenal Supporters Club Q&A session with Raul, Vinai, Ventukasham and Edu, which happened yesterday evening, with a lot of supporters from around London and from around the country travelled to the Emirates Stadium to do a Q&A with those three. They started off by having a bit of a presentation, saying what the expectations of the club are, what their progress has been, and of course then questions were thrown to them from the floor. Now what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to read out some of their statements. I'm also going to put those up on the screen so you can read them as well, because who wants to listen to me read without any prompts on the screen as well? And then I'm going to give you my thoughts on what they've said. So if we just dive straight into things, obviously if you are enjoying these videos, please give it a like, please subscribe if you're new with those notifications turned on, and leave a comment into your thoughts about the Q&A, maybe react to some of the questions, but the comments have always been positive as always, and I really appreciate reading through them, and I try to reply to as many as feasibly possible. So let's dive straight in to the Q&A. The Q&A now started with just Raul and Vinai basically having a little bit of a presentation and talking about they reacted to the US tour, and they reacted to two recent signings which we made. So let's have a brief look at what they both said. So Raul Sanllehi starts off by saying the young players were very good on the recent US tour, but this is like a long cook. You cannot rush it. It's great and they did well, but we need to protect them. But we're very pleased with them, not just their performance, but their attitude on the training ground. Vinai then added to him saying the commercial highlight of the tour was launching our partnership with Adidas in Denver and launching the new away kit in LA. These are our best-selling kits for many years, so that was a real highlight. I think it's good to highlight the Adidas deal, because it's been something which a lot of fans have been looking forward to. It's been something that's going to provide the club with extra funds, and hopefully we'll come on to something about funds a little bit later on in the video, but it's going to basically highlight the fact that Arsenal are going from Puma, which we really sort of had an issue with Puma overall. We didn't really like what Puma were providing with us. We didn't like the kits. Some of them were really horrible, and it got to the point where we're starting to associate poor performances with the colours of actual kits, which is a bit odd, but you can see the superstitious nature of fans, and that certainly took hold. But these kits, very, very retro. Everyone seems to like them. I'll certainly be getting hold of them as soon as I possibly can. Still undecided about who I will get on those shirts. Maybe you should tell me in the comment section below who you think I should get on the back. I'm leaning towards Ceballos for that Spanish link for obvious reasons. But let's continue with what they were saying. Sanllehi continues and says, we're very, very pleased with the two announcements from today. They're very different in nature and expectation. We're very pleased and proud to get Ceballos done. Many top clubs in Europe wanted this player. We like the player because of the position he plays and the way he comes out with the ball. Saliba was a different part of the deal. He is then to return on loan for a year, and we are pleased about that because the level of intensity and the level of demand in the Premier League is very strong. He's probably too young for that yet. As I said, we need to protect our young talent. We think it will be good for him in a less demanding league to continue his formative period, so we'll have a top defender for a decade. He saw for his career path the perfect solution for him. So in terms of the actual two signings, I actually said in the reaction to both of those deals that I found it very strange how they waited until today, or today being yesterday, to announce those signings right ahead of the Q&A. And I said in a tweet, and I said on the videos, that I didn't really want to see them reference both of those signings in a way to try and appease fans, because signing a player and then sending him back on loan, and signing a player just for a season without spending any real financial power on it, isn't going to quell the frustrations of fans who want to see real investment coming in from the club. So to use those two would have shown a real disconnect from what the fans are getting frustrated about. So the fact they referenced them here at the start and just said about what they were happy about the deals, and later on they don't mention the deals as far as I'm aware from the highlights. But for me, that was more of a positive sign that they didn't really use those two signings as something to beat us with. They used them just to highlight the happiness that they got from those two deals. So that I can actually take as more of a positive. Now, if we move down to the part where the people were asking questions from the floor, this article, by the way, is taken from Arseblog News. You can find the link for the full transcript in the description below. The first question that came from the floor was a question about whether Arsenal planned to sign a centre centre-back this season. Now, obviously, we know that Arsenal desperately need one, so this was a good question to ask. And the answer that they got from Raul was, I cannot say a name because I wouldn't be doing my job. If I say a name, I walk out the door tonight and he's £10 million more expensive. The transfer window is a moving target. I've been doing this for 16 years now, and I know that some windows are harder than others. This is a particularly hard window. When I talk with other clubs, this is a common knowledge. There is a bit of stagnation in the market, and you don't see the number of signings you normally see just yet. I don't know exactly how things will turn out, but I can assure you we are working every hour of every day. I think it's a bit like school, where you evaluate your grade at the end of the school year and not in the middle. Now, I can't really gloss over that comment because, as many of you watching know, I am a teacher. So if there's a link to go and say this is part to do with school, I'm obviously going to highlight that. Now, he says that I think it's a bit like school where you evaluate your grade at the end of the school year and not in the middle. Now, that's not true. What we'd actually do is that you get grades throughout the year and then you react to what happens. So say if a student gets a step 4, we don't do A, B and C's anymore, it's now numbers. So say an A grade is now a step 9, a B grade is a step 7, and it goes down like that. There's more basically specifics between them. So say a step 4 is a pass, a C grade. If you get a C grade halfway through the year, you evaluate that with the student, and you would say, these are the strategies that we're going to put in place to try and improve on that and try and get you up. You don't wait until the end of the year to get a result and then say, oh, this didn't work too much, but now we've got next year to work. Because what happens in your final year of school? Say you're halfway through that year and you're stuck on a step 3 and you want to get a step 4 to pass, or you're stuck on a step 7, you want to go into a step 8 to try and get into a really good school or sixth form or university or whatever. Imagine you're at that stage and you don't actually have an evaluation until the end of that year. That worried me slightly because for me that tells me the club are evaluating things at the end of the transfer window. They need to be constantly evaluating during that transfer window. They need to constantly be thinking that, wait, this deal didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? What did we do wrong? Why didn't we offer enough quickly enough? Why don't we learn from that situation? The Kieran Tierney situation for me is a perfect example. We know what Celtic want. We know what Celtic need to do it. So there's no point constantly trying to lowball them. I understand that you have to negotiate and you have to try and get the best deal for both clubs. But when you know that Celtic aren't going to sell until a certain price and they're set on that, and you know that you've made a little bit of extra cash from, say, Xavier Amici leaving for Hamburg, you've made some money from Ospina leaving, you've got that extra bit of cash, you've got the Adidas deal, why don't you just go out and add a few more millions and get the deal done now? Because surely the benefits of signing him earlier are much, much better for the club to integrate the player into the team and get him ready for the rest of the season. I know that he's got injury problems, but it works for any transfer. You want to get him in as early as possible. So that bit about saying it was like school and you evaluate things at the end did concern me a bit. I don't think you should evaluate at the end of something. I think you should be evaluating all the way through the process, making sure you're doing as much as you can to get the job done. A very long rambling question was then taken from the floor, which can be summed up as, why have we got only £40 million to spend on transfers? Now, I think this was a very, very key thing at the start of the window. We saw a lot of people turning around and saying that this wasn't good enough. Why do we only have this amount of money? And this was pretty much taken away from the floor straight away by Vinai. He says, I don't recognise this £40 million figure. I have read it a lot. That doesn't come from us. That doesn't come from the club. The numbers never come from us. We never, ever, ever talk about how much money we have to spend because that's the least helpful thing you can do. Raul's job is hard enough. If you go into a negotiation and everyone knows how much money you've got, it really doesn't help. It is true that our funds are more limited after 3 years in the Europa League, but the budget isn't £40 million. We have the budget to make a difference, but as Raul says, this is a particularly tough window and we're in the middle of it. I sense and understand the frustration, but there is a huge amount of misinformation out there in the market. For me, this was obvious. I knew that the £40 million thing was a complete myth. I get why you would ask the question, because you want to know why there seems to be restrictive finances. For obvious reasons, you asked that question. But I would have rather have seen a question came from the floor asking about how much transfer funds are available, how much are the club intending to spend, and how much is available to Unai as a manager and to Edu as technical director to get the deals done. Can we compete with bids that are going in for the likes of Wilfried Zaha from Everton for 60 million? Can we compete with bids going in for Nicolas Pepe for 70 million? To say, for what Emery said during the pre-season saying we're in for really expensive deals, what quantifies a really expensive deal? So to ask the question, what's this whole 40 million thing, when we knew pretty much by now that was a complete myth, because we've bid £40 million for Wilfried Zaha this season and we've already signed 2 other players on that day, I thought was a little bit a little bit dodgy and a little bit of a waste of a question. You could have worded it a bit better. I don't know who asked the questions. That was just my opinion on how that question could have been reused in a much better way. A question then came in about safe standing, and Vinai responded to it saying the government are going to consider the rules as to whether they will allow safe standing or not. I don't know how long that will take. Yes, we are in favour of safe standing in principle. The Emirates wasn't built for safe standing because it was built prior to 2006. So implementing safe standing is quite complicated. You can only do safe standing in the lower tier, and the lower tier here is a very shallow rake. So there is a risk of a load of seat kills. There is a risk of a whole load of seat kills. Basically, he means, it's a really odd way to say it. Basically, by that, he's saying that you could lose a lot of seats to implement safe standing because you have to take out a lot of seats. So what we're trying to work out now is what the impact would be on attendance if we took seats out and had safe standing. We're in favour in principle, but until we understand the impact on capacity, it's difficult for us to say we are definitely going to do it. I think in this day and age, there's plenty of high-class architects out there that will be able to work out a system in which we can still get safe standing. Because for me, right, and it might just be me. Now, safe standing, I've seen it implemented, I believe it's at Wolves, and they still have seats in those areas. I don't know if it's a requirement by the government, you still must have seats in those areas. But if you take out those seats and just put the railings in, for me, is that really going to take up too much extra space or not? I don't understand. I know that the Emirates itself has one of the largest in terms of how much leg room you get. If not the largest, it's got the most. So by adding a simple rail in place, I'm not sure if it actually would take up too much space, take out too many seats. And let's be honest, we're not filling out our stadium as much as we can. And if it's worth sacrificing a couple of thousand seats in order to increase the atmosphere. A question then came in about the club's short-termism over the last 10 to 15 years, basically talking about how our dealings and signings and contracts and decisions in terms of the board have been made for the short term with no real long-term planning. Sanielli responded at this point getting quite frustrated. He says, I get the frustration, I really do. If we keep saying we are terrible, we won't get anywhere. The last fans forum, the fourth or fifth time someone asked me why I left Barcelona to join Arsenal, I had to stop and say I have been congratulated all over the world of football for coming here. I used to represent Barca at UEFA and at the ECA. All the top clubs congratulated me for joining Arsenal. I am still very excited when I see what this club stands for, what it means, its dimensions, these facilities, this stadium. The stadium is fantastic and the training ground at Colney is outstanding. I look at our players, they are good players. They're very good players and they are getting into a system, but it's going to take them time. Please don't get me wrong. I cannot sleep when my team is not winning. I am not happy. Without that passion, we cannot go anywhere, but please let's be objective and have a little bit of patience. This project over the last 14 months has seen incredible changes. If we expect results in just one season, it's impossible. But if we kill it now, we will have to start all over again. Last season, we scored more goals. We fought for third place until the final game, and we got to a European final. We didn't do it, but it was an improvement. I hear lots of people talk here about supporting with their fathers and their grandfathers, and that is great. Without history, legends, statues, pictures, you don't have a club and you don't have Arsenal. There are clubs out there who will kill to have that. They are richer now and they are winning trophies, but they still don't have what we have here. So let's use it in a positive, not the negative. Vinai, let's just react to what Raul has said there then. So it's a classic answer, really. It's a classic Arsenal answer. The question's asking about how we're actually making decisions in terms of contracts, in terms of player sales and player buys, the fact that we're buying players, we're not selling them on for too much. That's what's meant by short-termism. I'm not sure if it's a translation thing. Raul's English is pretty darn good. So I'm not sure what's happened there with that answer. I think it's a disappointing answer for the question. I wanted a little bit more responsibility to be taken, not to keep highlighting the fact of what we've got. I'd rather them actually react to the question and asked about how or what we are doing currently to try and improve things. That was a great opportunity for Raul to turn around and say what they're going to do. Well, he's admitted in the past that we've made mistakes, for instance with the Aaron Ramsey situation, but there was another opportunity where he really could have taken some responsibility and reacted to that by saying we're now going to do this and this. We realise this has happened, but we're going to do X, Y and Z to try and improve that moving forwards. I realise myself that this is a 14-month issue in terms of losing Arsene Wenger, moving to Unai Emery, losing Ivan Gazidis, putting Vinai and Raul in place, employing Edu and employing Farmy and all these different people that have come in to take on the roles that Arsene Wenger did all by himself. but there was an opportunity there to admit some more mistakes. And again, maybe it was pride, maybe it was just to save some face, but they missed out on the opportunity once again. Vinai responded to it by saying, "We totally get the frustration. We are not where we want to be. We know people want to see actions and not hear words. Unfortunately, this is a Q&A, so we can only give you words tonight. There has been a lot of change over the last 14 months, and it's all pointed to getting back to where we need to be, and we have a much better chance of doing that with our fans behind us. The ultimate objective is not to get back competing for the Premier League and the Champions League. The first step in that objective is getting back into the Champions League. That's our short-term objective, but it's not where we want to go long-term. We need to be realistic. We're probably not going to get from where we are now to winning the Premier League next season. What we're trying to do first is get back into the Champions League, but that's not the ultimate objective." That was sort of the last point on the Ask Blog's blog in which he highlighted those. I'm not sure if there's any other questions that were asked, but I'm pretty sure from watching Darren on Twitter's Twitter that was pretty much an overall view of everything. So let's react just quickly to what Vinai said there. I think that was a much better answer than what Raul gave. He talked about what they want to do in the short term. He talked about what they want to do in the long term. For me, this was, again, obvious. I know that we are wanting as Arsenal fans to see us get back into that Champions League, but that just isn't feasible right now. We've got too many clubs competing with us. We've got too many clubs around us. Sorry, we've got too many clubs in terms of trying to compete for that Premier League title. Liverpool and Manchester City are way too far ahead of us. We've got Chelsea, United and Tottenham Hotspur around us, and we need to focus on beating those guys into a top 4 place before we can muster the financial strength to challenge Manchester City and Liverpool. And even then, because of how they're structured and the advantages that they got before FFP came in and the money that they spent, especially Manchester City, Liverpool's a different scenario. Liverpool actually is a scenario where they, again, have a self-sustaining model exactly like ours, but they manage to buy players and sell players for good prices, whereas Arsenal always seem to sell players for extremely low prices. And there's only a couple of exceptions where we actually got a decent deal for players such as Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, which ironically went to Liverpool. So there, in terms of how that works, I don't think we've done enough in the past, and I'm annoyed that they didn't sort of say, especially when this links to the Josh Kroenke question. If you look at the Josh Kroenke when he turned around and was asked if they could be compared or if they look to other teams to sort of mirror how they're working, he said he'd rather look inwards at KSE, when actually what he said was he recognises what the likes of Liverpool have done and they want to try and emulate that. You should be able to admit your opposition and your rival successes and say, this is where they've done well, we want to emulate and go past that and compete and beat that. And they didn't answer it in that way, which was disappointing. But I did respect the fact that Vinai went to talk about what the short-term goal is, which is Champions League. I get very frustrated on Twitter with a lot of people who say, we're Arsenal, we should be competing for the Premier League season upon season. I'm sorry, and this is just realistic, we're not at the level yet where we can compete for the Premier League and get into the Champions League and possibly win it. We're just not at that stage. It's not a case of we're not a big club enough. We just don't have the resources to compete with the teams that are consistently winning against top 6 sides, and we're not doing that just yet. So it is a step-by-step process. I like the fact that they admitted the long goal is still to get there, and I know that will still cause a lot of frustrations with fans because they've been told this for a long, long time. But what else are you going to do? You're not going to expect them to turn around and say, we aren't going to win the Premier League for the next 10 seasons. They're not going to say that. So for the short term, we need to focus on what Vinai said and getting back into the Champions League, and that's important for next year. And I think some of the signings that we've made, like Danny Ceballos, doing that very shrewdly and replacing Aaron Ramsey for a very, very low fee just for a single season to focus current finances on other areas, I think was very good of the Arsenal board and of not necessarily the board, but just the team that was involved in getting that transfer done. So there are positives to take from this. I think there was, and speaking to a few people that went to the Q&A, they said that there was a lot of surprise in the reaction from both Vinai and Raul, how angry and frustrated some of the fans were. And I think that was always going to be the case. They always seem very disconnected from us as fans. So the fact they were getting visibly frustrated by how frustrated we were, and at some of the questions the people on the floor were asking, is a good sign for me. And I'm glad they may have realised that we are more frustrated than they seemingly thought, and hopefully that will prompt them into some actions. As Vinai said, the actions completely speak louder than words, and he said that they can't do it there at a Q&A, but what they can do for the rest of this transfer window is get deals done. Compete with Everton for Zaha, get that deal over the line if that's the one they're going for. If it's Nicolas Pepe, which supposedly we've agreed a €72 million fee for, hopefully Raul can use his supposed skills at attracting players to get Pepe into the club. Either one of those two will appease a lot of fans by spending a lot of money. You then have to go and get the Kieran Tierney deal done. You go out to Celtic and you say, what do you want for him? You want 25 million, you want a lot of it up front? Okay, here it is, here's the money, get the job done. And that's as simple as that. That's how it gets done. That's how you show that your actions are speaking more than your words. You get those two deals over the line. And ultimately, if we can sign a centre-back as well on top of that, for me, that would equate to a 10 out of 10 transfer window, dependent on who those wingers and that centre-back would be that comes in, of course. But I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown. I hope they've given you some insight. As I said, this comes from Arsblog News. If you want to check out the entire article, it will be in the link in the description. But I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give it a like. Please subscribe if you're new with those notifications turned on. And leave your comment in the comment section below of your reaction and your thoughts to what has been a rather volatile in some ways Q&A session, but definitely a positive one in terms of the reaction that it got from some of the fans. And I hope going forwards we can see some of these actions really come out to the fore and show that the club clearly do care, because we care, but do they?